I'm Aria Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W. The playoffs are here. First round is tipping off, and there is no shortage of storylines. The Aces on a 16-game run to catapult them to second place. The Dream impressive third-place finish. Not to mention the defending champs and that scary team down in Phoenix. So many big storylines, and we haven't even mentioned the team that has held on to first place handedly for most of the season. The Minnesota Lynx. I'm joined by Mitchell Hansen of Winsidr, your go-to guy for all Lynx news, to discuss this epic season and, as they're calling it, the ride for five. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. That's patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. Check us out on all media platforms. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, YouTube. And if you like wearing your WNBA fandom, check out the show notes for all of the affiliate links. Wear the top WNBA merch while helping Winsidr grow. And we are back. Welcome back to the Winsidr Show. Excited to be here with my guest for this episode, part of the Winsidr team and fellow Minnesotan, Mitchell Hansen. Mitchell, how are you doing on this fine, lovely day?
I'm doing well. We have playoff basketball. That's my favorite time of the year, best time of the year. I'm ready to get into it. Let's do it.
My favorite part about playoff basketball, specifically Minnesota Lynx playoff basketball, is messaging all of my Minnesota friends. Hey, there's a Minnesota sports team that's one of the top seeds in the playoffs, because it's Lynx, so you can probably bet down that you're going to do that every year. Text them and be like, you better be paying attention. It is an exciting time. Probably, like, it's wild to think we have a few things to discuss. I did an episode with Waterloo last week where we were talking Atlanta Dream, and we're gonna have a lot of the same questions kind of to dissect the teams, but I want to lay it out first to set the stage. This is a team who has been started off 10-0, 12-0, something crazy like that. I'm blanking right now. Historic run to start their year. Do you remember exactly?
I don't remember, honestly. It seems like it was about a year ago now.
I know.
I should know that.
For a condensed season, whatever. This team's, you'll get it up in a sec. This team starts off historically hot, and from that point really ran away with the top seed to the point where, like, the last month, and you and I have had public discussions about this, for the last month, this team has not had the same challenge other teams have had. They have had the challenge that great teams have, which is you secured your place in the playoffs. You secured your spot in the league standing so early on. Now, what do you do? Great coaches know what to do with that. Cheryl Reeve is a great coach, so I have to hand it to her and say, like, she probably knew better than I could say what to do. Not probably, of course. So, look, there was some bumps as the season went on, but, like, the storyline for Minnesota this season is Nafisa Collier making an impressive MVP run, finishing 50, 40, 90, only done one other time in WNBA. That was Elena Deladon in 2019 when they won the championship. Also a season that Deladon faced some injuries. Fia's faced some injuries this season too. But this team has held that control of first place for the majority of the season and handedly. New York, the team that seemed like was going to be up there with them, just like heavyweight bout, back and forth, just didn't have that throughout the season, ends up finishing the season in fifth place. There's been other teams that have been hot and cold. Minnesota has just taken care of business and really had I would call it a professional season. Where do you think, when I talk about this team and I say all of that, they have flown under the radar? We can talk about New York being a team that's flown under the radar, finally getting healthy and in fifth spot. Cool, scary, great. We can talk about Phoenix, adding a player mid-season. We're talking about a team that has literally been first place for basically the whole season, and I have yet to see any major coverage about this team going into the playoffs and what this team can bring in terms of trying to make another championship run. When I say that, am I properly depicting this season? What am I leaving out? Where's your head at?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. I do think, and this is no knock on, let's say Nafisa Collier or even the Minnesota Lynx in general, but a lot of the other teams, let's look at Las Vegas, for example, they have the star power that get a lot of the hype, get a lot of the attention. Minnesota doesn't really have that type of player. Like they have Fee, she's a very quiet superstar. She doesn't ever do really anything controversial. She just kind of stays in her lane and does her job, and she does it well. But there's nothing really flashy about this Lynx team, and that's what fans love. That's what media members
Well, wait
love.
a second. Now, wait a second.
Well, they do have the stud buds. They
Thank
do
you.
have that.
Thank you. We
They do
can't
have
ignore
that.
them. By the way,
Yeah.
shout out to the Minnesota franchise. You know I love to hate on a franchise. You know I love to say that the franchises aren't leaning into their players enough. The fan appreciation night, stud buds rocking the pink wigs for everybody in the arena, everybody buying into it. It looked like 80% of the crowd, if not more, was wearing the pink wigs
Hmm.
for the game. It was amazing. And the stud buds who had recently dyed their hair red, went back pink for the game. It was electric. Big win. Sorry, you can't say they're not flashy.
Well,
You know,
yes, okay, you got me there. That is a good point. But I mean, for this team in general, I mean, you even look at down the stretch of the year, what has been the storyline? The Las Vegas Aces,
mm-hmm.
and not to keep going back to the Aces, and I'm not ripping on them by any means, but in credit to them, they've won 16 straight games going into the postseason. That's remarkable. That is insane. But it is a what have you done for me lately league, and in the Lynx I think people are just kind of bored that they're at the top, and that's a credit to Minnesota. I mean, they were going back to what we were talking about earlier. They started 9-0, went 12-2 to start the season. They've been there the whole time, and especially over the last, let's say, 3 weeks of the regular season, Minnesota's just kind of been in coast mode, and it's just kind of been like, okay, we hurried up, and now we're waiting until the postseason starts. So I do agree that they kind of flown a little bit under the radar, but there's just nothing. Maybe with the exception of the MVP case for Nafisa Collier or the stud buds, like there's nothing really that people want to write about. People want to that will cause a lot of buzz. And that's okay. I mean, I view it, not to compare, the NBA to the WNBA because I don't like doing that, but I view it similar to like the San Antonio Spurs when they were in their, successful years in the NBA. They were just a really good team. They were a really complete team. They flew under the radar and they were just kind of quiet. And that's very similar to Minnesota. They're just consistently good and they're kind of quiet. And it will be interesting to see if that buzz kind of picks up or as the playoffs get underway, and once people start to see, okay, now this Minnesota team is legit. I don't think people are doubting that with you don't just go 34-10 on accident, but I think it will pick up in the postseason. But I do agree, and that they've kind of flown a little bit under the radar, and that might end up impacting the awards too, just because there are other players that maybe get a little bit more buzz that might get awards that maybe Lynx players are deserving of. So, long story short, I do agree with you, but it's I think Minnesota they'll take that. They're okay with kind of flying under the radar, so to speak, and they're just ready to get the playoffs going.
And you brought up the awards, so I have to. The AP awards came out, and I'm not gonna I'm a WNBA voter. Eventually, I'll
Mm-hmm.
release what my list was. But when you see the AP awards, typically, I'll say this year, normally there's like an egregious vote somewhere
Mm-hmm.
in the AP awards over the past few years. I'll just say that. This year, the thing that shocked me, I have to say, is you have a team that points per game, number one, assists per game, number one, field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, number two in steals per game, number three in blocks per game, 2 and 3-point percentage. The only stat that they're not ranking, top 5 in is rebounds per game and free throw percentage. And they have
Mm-hmm.
dominated throughout the season. They have the number one defense and number one offensive rating. And only Nafisa Collier made any mention in that. And that, to me, that's a little shocking because if you at least in my mind, like I break it down kind of like this. The argument against these, like the Lynx players getting the recognition, is either this team has the best coach or this amazing coach, so it makes the players who aren't necessarily as good as some of the other star powers that much better. And then it's like, okay, but these players are actually really good, but they have fee. Fee makes them that much better. But fee is that much, like, you kind of use, it's kind of like a triangle, all relying on each other, which then lessens all of them. And to me, at a certain point, like, we look around the league, you have a super team in New York who has like 3 MVPs. You have a team in Vegas who has a 3-time 3 MVPs, right? Can we start saying that? Has one of the most prolific scorers in league history in Jewel Lloyd, even though she struggled. Jackie Young, one of the most versatile, underrated players in league history. I'll say that. And we can't even forget about like the point guard. And then there's there's so many teams that have so much more. And like the beauty of Minnesota, and this is what I'll get to in a sec, but the beauty of Minnesota is because they don't have that flashiness, that star power, pizzazz, whatever that we were talking about. And yet they are able to come together and be that good of a team. That's why it's so shocking to me that you don't get a little bit more recognition for someone like an Alana Smith, for somebody like an Atisha Heidemann. Not necessarily saying that she has to be the 6th player of the year or that I voted, but I'm just saying like those are some of the things that are like popping in my head, or some more respect for what Courtney Williams has been able to do this season. Like this team is doing historic things, even if they haven't been the most dominant team in August.
Yeah.
I
would just say too, like I am a little surprised that, Alana Smith has been in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. She wasn't even named to the second team. And so that it kind of surprised me a little bit. And this, now granted, this is just the AP awards, not just the AP awards, but this isn't the official WNBA awards. But to your point, like Courtney Williams is having her best season in probably 5 years. As far her best season with the Lynx for sure. She's an all-star. Alana Smith has been just consistent and just incredible on the defensive end. And she hasn't really been getting any love at all. And it's not, they do a lot of the stuff that's not the flashy stuff. And I think that's hurting them. And I view kind of these season end awards as kind of I don't want to say most improved, but kind of most improved as far as, people expected the Lynx to be good coming into the year. So your expectations are high. The players meet those expectations. Okay, there's nothing that they're doing to surpass your expectation. Where a lot of these awards are just that. They're, I didn't expect, Natisha Heidemann to have, such a great year. So she deserves to be 6th player of the year. I didn't, expect Golden State to have, that type of year. So that means that Cheryl Reeve will not be coach of the year. And I mean, whatever, all the coaches are deserving for that award in my mind to begin with. But it is.
Wait a second. Are you saying?
Well, not every coach, but
okay, all right.
Coaches in the running, I should say.
Okay, all right, cool. Just clarification for I want anyone in our mentions. All right,
yeah, definitely not every coach. I will not be on record saying that, but it is kind of, I think, a most improved award for all of them. Because like you said, you come in, whether it's a team or individual players, you come into a season with the expectation of what they could be or what they should be. And if they usually, exceed those expectations, they're up for some sort of award. Well, Minnesota has done, even the individual players have done better than what they did last year. But I think a lot of people they're used to it. And that's maybe the downside. And it's unfortunate, but, it's just reality of what takes place with the voting. And you could throw that in with all-star voting too, and just kind of the recognition there with players across the league, not just specifically the Lynx. But yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate. It is, just because every Lynx player will tell you that they don't need that recognition. They don't need to be on first, second team. Nafisa Collier could probably care less if she's on the first, second all WNBA team. Um, but it is nice. It's nice to be rewarded for the type of season you're having, because most of them are having, better years than even last year, maybe even career years. So it's unfortunate, especially for a team that went 34-10.
Yeah, no, totally. But I will say on the flip side, the expectations have to be high for this team. Like,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, this team has done what it's done, and this is a year they need to capitalize.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about, when we were sitting in the same spot last year going into the playoffs, there was still an element of like, is this a everything's clicking type season and they need to take advantage of it? They have lightning in a bottle. What we know now, and I even questioned that like up until, 5 games into this season, and I was like, okay, why am I questioning this? I'm just being, the contrarian. But we know what this is. We know the consistency of greatness we have seen from this team. I have to think, and maybe the only thing holding me back from saying this, and I'm going to break myself from the mental pain of being a Minnesota sports fan your whole life. The only thing I think holding me back from saying this has to be championship or bust of a season when we get, now that we're at the playoffs, is because of how good this team has been, how we've seen the other teams struggle. We know this team has the ability to beat anybody in this league and beat them handedly.
Mm-hmm.
They beat the Aces by 53.
Yeah.
50 freaking 3.
Well, and this team, they have 7-8 players that can play meaningful basketball. Like, they can come in and contribute at any point, at any time, which is dangerous. I mean, it makes a huge difference in the playoffs too, because you're planning for, maybe 5-6 players, typically, and kind of game planning for all of them, and then you'll let the rest of the players beat you if they get hot. But Minnesota, you have to plan or kind of game plan against the entire roster because they're so deep. And I think this is I would say this year is probably the deepest team since their dynasty era ended. Well, it is the deepest team, but maybe the most talented team since that dynasty era ended, and that being in 2017, maybe even 2018. And I view this team very similar to that, as far as, you have the 5 players that are staples, and then you have like 3-4 players off the bench that are maybe, borderline starting caliber, or could actually, play meaningful minutes, or a bulk of the minutes. So, I mean, it's this team, they did put that expectation high. They reached the finals last year, and if they would have dipped back down, let's say, like, not to pick on New York, but let's say they had like a type of season that New York had. Okay, maybe the expectations aren't so high going into the postseason for this Lynx team, but they went 34-10. Like, they've been the best team all season long, and that's coming off of a finals run. So the expectation is, Cheryl Reeve will tell you every year the expectation is championship, but the expectation is a championship this year. I'm reaching the finals, obviously, but it's winning a championship in 2025.
Yeah. All right. Talk to me. What do you think we talked about, I think you've hit it on the head. We talked about it in like ad nauseum. Biggest strength, I would say, you can say defense, you can say, I would say the depth and just the buy-in, the way that what you were talking about, everyone's playing together. Everybody is making each other better. And honestly, like, from a foundational standpoint, this team was built to be players that can fit around Fee, that make Fee a better player, better version of herself, and Fee makes the players around her a better version of themselves. What do you think the biggest weakness of this team is?
I would say it's kind of twofold for me. Consistency to some extent, in turnovers, and that kind of goes hand in hand. In the 10 losses, or even some of the games that they did end up pulling away at the end and winning, one thing that we've seen that's been the Achilles heel of this Lynx team is turning the ball over. And as a result, more often than not, they give up a lot of points on the other end when they do have those turnovers. So that is one thing I'm concerned about, or kind of maybe watching more in the postseason. But you could throw consistency in kind of tying into that at the same time, which when turnovers do happen, consistency drops down where they're not the team that we've been used to seeing. Um, this team is a team that lives and breathes off its defense. If the defense is playing well, the offense follows immediately. It's happened all season long. You could even say last year it happened like that. So they just need to be, if they can be consistent on the defensive end, which they have been most of the season, they can continue to be consistent on that end, and kind of shore up the turnovers. I think they'll be perfectly fine. But I agree with you with the strength of them being deep, and the buy-in, like that they've been bought in since day one, and that has shown. And credit to Cheryl Reeve and her coaching staff for kind of instilling that and establishing that early, because it's paid dividends here at the end of the regular season.
Most definitely has. We should note, obviously, we're not looking past the first round, which will probably be starting either the day this episode comes out or following the game. Minnesota swept the Valkyries 4-0 in their matchups, 86-75, 82-71, 78-72, and 72-53 most recently, the last game of the regular season. And they played, like 4 or 5 days before that. Mm-hmm. Look, impressive what we've seen from the Valkyries, but we're not here to talk about the Valkyries this episode. Tell me, what do you love and what do you hate about this Lynx team?
This is just me personally. I love the personalities on this team. I mean, you throw in the stud buds, they're phenomenal. They're one of the most entertaining teams that I've had pleasure of covering, and I've covered the Simone Augustus, Lindsay Whalen era. So that alone was entertaining. But this team is just you can tell they get along so well and they mesh so well. That goes back to the buy-in thing we talked about. But when it comes to on the court, they're just a fun team to watch fundamentally. Like they play lockdown defense and they just move the ball really well offensively. They're so smooth. They're just all connected. Their ability to shoot from three is remarkable. That's something they could be a little bit more, consistent in, specifically with individual players on the team. But they can attack you in so many different ways, which is a lot of fun to watch. And there's a lot of different pieces that can come in and contribute, which is key in the playoffs, especially late in the playoffs. One thing that I wish this team had more of is size. And that's part by design. They do, to like you were talking about earlier, they surrounded the players around Nafisa Collier and her skill set, which is running the floor, kind of playing a kind of a spread offense, or kind of stretching 5 out kind of style offense. They can stretch the floor and they can take it to you inside too. But when you face a team like, you could say Las Vegas, or even specifically Atlanta, this is something we saw in the season against Atlanta. Those bigs can hurt Minnesota. And that's something that I'm looking for. Let's say Phoenix comes out of the first round and plays Minnesota. That's going to be a tough matchup, just with that size. So that is something that, and Jess Shepard helps a little bit coming off the bench, just having kind of that bruiser and that physicality of that she presents. That's a huge addition. But, I would like to see this team a little bit bigger, being able to especially match up against those bigger teams. But, you kind of play both ends of that, where they can stretch the floor and then that's a disadvantage for the other team that does have those bigs out there. But that's one thing that I wish maybe they had a little bit more of. And I say that with, this team having the season that they did, and it's hard to pick something when you win 34 games, but that is one thing that I've kind of noticed throughout the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the addition of Masha is nice, although she, I think openly, you might have even posted the video of her saying like her shot's been off since giving birth, and like she needs to get it back to like up to her standard. Those were her words, not mine. She has so much size and can be a benefit. I want to remind people how highly touted of a young prospect she was when she came into the W, one of the top players in Europe. She has size. She has been not like crazy minutes, but is definitely going to be a useful addition to this team in spurts throughout this playoff run, in the same way that, a Dorka was last year,
Yeah.
in the same way that they were searching for, or they, a Jess Shepard has that muscle and size, or a Maisha Hines Allen last year. Like, you got to have that in different ways, because you can't just, put your player through, an individual player through that is a hard toll on the body. So totally. And I think, something that's interesting when I think back on this season for the Lynx is, while it feels like there's been times where they've had really long cold streaks where they just couldn't score or something in games, not like multi-game long, but like in-game cold streaks. The dominance level of them to overcome that later in the game. Yes, they had a couple games where they got waxed. That happens. But their ability to come back mid-game, make halftime adjustments, quarter adjustments, and make a deep run and really come back after, an 8-minute no score streak and then still win by 15. I think, like, sometimes you remember more of that cold streak than the fact that they won by 15 in the end. And then you go back and you think about it and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that game. That was rough. And it's like, yeah, well, they won by 15. So there's they're a conundrum. They're an interesting one, but you have to think they're all in for this season, as you said. Do you have any final thoughts on this team? Do you want to make predictions? I'm not going to put you on the spot or anything. I'll make you predict as far as you want to go, but
Yeah,
give me your closing thoughts.
I do think that when it comes to the first round, the Lynx are going to sweep Golden State. Golden State's a great story. In your first season, reaching the playoffs is phenomenal, especially when a lot of people didn't think that they even had a chance. And you throw in the injuries and stuff that they endured. It's been a great season. But I do think Minnesota is going to win Game 1 in Minneapolis pretty handily. I do think they're going to go back to San Jose in Game 2, since they're going to be switching up from Chase Center to the SAP Center or whatever, wherever they're playing.
Us Midwesterners trying
Yeah.
to call out the arenas.
I don't know what it. I know Chase Center. That's about it. But
yeah,
they.
It's called Valhalla. Okay.
Yeah. But
so kicking the Valkyries out of Valhalla, which is all right. Sorry, go.
Yeah. But in Game 2, I think it'll be closer. I still think Minnesota's going to win that game. The one thing, and I'll get back to kind of the prediction part of thing, but one thing that I really do like about this team, and something that is going to be big entering the playoffs and throughout the playoffs, is most of them have been there. They've been in these situations. They've now experienced what it takes to make a deep playoff run, and that is huge. Not only for experience of reaching the WNBA finals or winning the WNBA finals, but the preparation that goes into it and the constant back and forth and kind of in series battle that you have. Having that mindset is huge, and that's something that Minnesota has. You have about seven players that have been through this before, 7 key players. And Jess Shepard is a player that is playing in her first playoff game, which is going to be great.
That's mind blowing to think about.
So she's going to be going through it for the first time, but outside of that, really everybody else above her has that experience. And that'll be huge with road games, with just how to handle your body throughout the postseason. So I do. That is one thing that I think Minnesota has an advantage of. That you could even throw in New York and Las Vegas in that conversation too. They have that experience. But that is something that will be big for Minnesota. But when it comes to how far this team could go, I'm really intrigued by that second round matchup, that semifinals matchup, whether it's New York or Phoenix. The reason I say that is because, Minnesota, New York, everybody knows what happened last year, reaching or facing off in the WNBA finals. That would just be a great storyline. But when it comes to Phoenix, Minnesota has not seen Phoenix at its full strength yet. Earlier in this season, they didn't have their full big three playing against Minnesota. So that would be the first time Minnesota sees, the big three of Phoenix. And I would be really intrigued to see how that matchup would go. If I had to lean a certain way with predicting, I think it would be Minnesota and Phoenix in the semifinals. Just because I think home court advantage is going to play a big role in that series. But if it's Minnesota, New York, that's would be phenomenal as well. But I do think when it's all said and done, Minnesota will reach the finals. I am hesitant on making a prediction of if they would win the finals yet. I say that because it all depends on who they play. I know that that's kind of a cop out, but if it's, I think it'll be Atlanta or Las Vegas. If it's Las Vegas, I think they honestly have a better chance, the Lynx do, against Las Vegas than they do Atlanta. Atlanta has Minnesota's number, and I don't know. It is the size. That is a big thing. But I'm more worried, I would say, I'm more worried, entering the playoffs about Las Vegas, just with how hot they've been, and kind of riding that hot streak into the postseason. But when it comes matchup wise, I'm more worried about Atlanta against Minnesota. So if that's the finals matchup, I think it could very well be a 7-game series. I think either way, it'll be probably like 6-7 games. But I'll make the prediction once we get closer. But I do think Minnesota does reach the finals when it's all said and done.
We'll check back in when it's a little bit closer. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I very much agree with honestly, I think this playoffs, Minnesota, I think, should handle the Valkyries. There's levels to this. The Valkyries have had a great run. It feels like to me, look, they might really impress, and I think we're going to see more. I don't know what's going to happen in game one, but I think game one is going to be a little bit more of that intensity, but I think they're almost, for lack of a better term, running on fumes, the Valkyries.
Yeah.
That Atlanta, that possibility of Atlanta facing off against Vegas is so intriguing to me. The New York Phoenix series, I think, is going to be super interesting. The storylines you have there. Mm-hmm. Honestly, if Minnesota makes it to the finals, and I have a little bit of a concern of Minnesota sweeping, having a little bit of rest and not looking good early on in the second series, but that's not here nor there. Mm-hmm. I almost think that the disadvantage that Atlanta has, late game execution is so concerning for me with Atlanta, and their lack of experience. Like, yes, Jordan Canada's been there, but not in a leadership role. Mm-hmm. BG's been there and won, but it wasn't a leadership role. I'm sorry. Like, she was a rookie or coming off rookie, whatever it was at that time. I don't know if they have that ability to execute in those key moments late game in the finals in a 7-game series. And that's why I think that I would agree with everything for the most part up until that Atlanta part. I would almost think A'ja Wilson and what she's doing, if she continues this, if they could go cold and go back to like the first 2/3 of the season at any point. Mm-hmm. But if they don't, you have to be extra concerned about them. All right, well, we'll have you back on a little bit later and we'll discuss more. Yeah. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. Remind the people where they can find you and your team's Lynx coverage.
Yeah, you can follow me on Blue Sky and Twitter. I'm Hansen13 on Blue Sky, and then M_Hansen13 on Twitter or X. I'll call it Twitter till the day I die. End. But you can also follow my Hitting the Hardwood podcast. You can follow that across social medias too at Hitting the Hardwood. And then you can find my work obviously here at Winsidr and a few other areas. But you can follow me on social media to find all that and catch all my random nonsense that I spew on social media. So
go Vikings.
Heck yeah, let's go. Skol Vikes.